what if I told you that I had for you a series with a very profound, meaningful message at the start, and then as it went on, kind of just became boiled down to its base capitalist components and sold off for scrap, and that I could teach you guys all about it? What would you say to that?
Is it that Westworld series of director person that makes all those shows that like starts off really sci-fi and mysterious and then just devolves?
I don't think that's right, Fran. I think this is a real outlier situation we have here.
This series that we're going to talk about is Godzilla, the king of the monsters. And then the intro rolls.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
I was just gonna cut in here, and you know what, Fran? Why don't you just kick it off right away? What are we doing here? Why wait around?
Not just interrupting you all.
No. Why don't you just hit it off the bat, so then we can just kind of roll with it. Just have some fun.
All right. Welcome to The Lore You Know, a podcast where some friends dive into the fantastical and often convoluted lore of media that we grew up with and love sometimes. And here to bring you the mostly correct facts about made-up things this week are me, Fran.
Me, Ethan.
And I'm CJ. I come to you once more as your humble lore master because we have important business to discuss. I do currently have a mustache, and I will be the first to say that this can be surprising if you're physically looking at me.
Yeah.
But don't worry, by the time you're listening, it will be gone again, like so many whispers into the breeze.
So many whiskers in the breeze.
Oh, Ethan, you came to come do a podcast. You brought the comedy today. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Because I am livid and excited.
An angry mustache?
Yeah, this is an angry mustache.
I feel like a white man can sell anger better if he has a mustache.
Right. And like a split haircut down the center that like slowly gets more like frayed as he gets more exacerbated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exasperated?
Exacerbated.
Okay.
Exasperilla. I feel like I have so much to talk about. It feels like it's been so long since we recorded, which I guess it has. I mean, it's before all the holiday season stuff. So it's been a long time that we've gotten back together. But we have decided to come back after the holiday, betwixt the holidays, with a big one, a series that has spanned 70 years. It is so big that people often separate it in the same way they separate Japan's different eras. Like it has seen
with the emperor.
It has seen many of the different eras of Japan, so they just divide out the movies by that. It is
seriously.
It's
great. I love that.
Actually absurd the amount of content that we have. But I'm excited to talk about it because we're going to have a lot of insight. We're going to have a lot of laughs. And, we already did a series about Japanese allegories for nuclear armament. So, like, who knows?
We did do that.
Like, we're going to already have so much baseline knowledge. We're finally going to be able to build. You know how sometimes you split yourself and you never really get a chance to, like, build any of those skill sets individually? Well, this time we are. We're just going to talk about it.
I do truly think that my base knowledge for Godzilla, like, percentage-wise of, like, knowledge of it is higher than my base knowledge of Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah.
That actually that's a good like barometer, right? Like that.
Yeah.
If you aren't religious, what else is there? There's kaiju
Godzilla.
fighting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I can buy into that.
So just to set the stage a little bit here, what we're talking about. I believe the first Godzilla movie was in 1954. It was titled Godzilla, and it was an analogy for nuclear war. Obviously the bombing of Japan happened in 1945, and throughout the 50s, the United States and Russia were constantly performing nuclear tests for science reasons, but also just to show off to each other.
Reasons.
Yeah, just to be like, look at how big our explosive goes off. And a lot of those tests were in the Pacific Ocean, for those who don't know.
They were trying to see which side had the biggest phallic-shaped explosion at the end of it.
Mushroom shape sometimes.
Pretty interesting, though, that the most powerful bomb makes a big dick, though. makes you think that, doesn't it? Makes you think that's a naturally powerful shape.
That makes me wonder, then why do you have to do No Shave November to bring awareness when you could just drop bombs?
Well, they do that too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of, today's a great day. We're recording on Henry Kissinger is Dead Day, so that's very fun.
Pretty neat.
That's fun.
Can you help those in the audience who don't have the historical knowledge and hasn't heeded our warnings to go watch Crash Course?
He's basically a war criminal who expanded the Vietnam War and included neutral countries like Cambodia and just did a bunch of genocides there. He didn't do them personally, but he signed off on them. So.
Also hated the Godzilla series.
Right. Yeah. truly a bad guy. He said, I didn't like them. They were all in moonspeak, he said, whatever that means. And I'm glad he's dead. So that's great. So I'm feeling great. Everything's coming up, Team Us. And now we get to talk about Godzilla and all of the many twists and turns that this series takes. Fran, what do you know about our charming protagonist for the series Godzilla?
I know that Godzilla, once again, is an allegory for the devastation of nuclear testing on nature.
Because we just said that,
yeah,
right?
But I knew that before, because I'm pretty sure if you rewind to previous episodes, I have referenced it previously when we talked about nuclear holocaust. But it's fine. The Godzilla monster, Kaiju, comes from the ocean. I have to make sure I'm not getting it mixed up with Pacific Rim, because I think Pacific Rim is where the kaijus come from, the Mariana Trench, which is probably not where Godzilla comes from. Godzilla fights a lot of monsters like Mothra.
Yep.
And King Kong.
Yep.
And Mecha Godzilla. I know that because there's a keychain of that hanging in our kitchen.
Nice.
So yeah, and there's some fighting going on, and it's a great time.
Okay, yeah, that's great background knowledge. I'm not gonna ask Ethan because he's a dweeb who likes giant mechs, so I'm sure he's seen a lot of at least adjacent stuff.
Pretty rude.
But don't worry, Ethan. I got a few little surprises down the line. I think you're gonna like as well. So I got a little something for everyone this episode. I'm a cheeky little trickster this time.
That's great. I was expecting to not like any of this, so I'm glad to hear that you got.
No, we gotta have some fun sometimes. We have been talking a lot of bad things, and we'll continue to do that today. That's that part won't change. But we're gonna have some fun with it. We're just gonna be cheeky little guys. This will be like, oh, which episode of The Lore You Know should you watch? And they'll be like, the Godzilla one. That one's fun and cheeky. CJ has a mustache. It's great. From my research, and these are just rough estimates because it's really hard to pin down, there's no less than 33 movies that were filmed by the Toho studio in Japan, and no less than 6 American movies that were filmed in Hollywood. Are
they considered canon?
We'll get to that, Fran. This is another great part about Godzilla. They don't give a fuck about canon, which at this point, that's great.
Right. So you're telling me You're telling me they're not trying to create a singular universe wherein all of the series is canon?
Like
Well,
the Dooku.
I wouldn't say they're not trying to do that, but
Right, yeah.
we'll get there. We're still in the 50s right now, so
All right, that sounds like a way better place to be. All right.
let's travel. Yeah, I mean, as long as you're a white man.
Damn.
All right, let's go then to that original Godzilla film, which is going to lay a lot of the groundwork for, at the very least, like what we should expect from a Godzilla film. And I would say a lot of the Godzilla films, at the very least, stay true to the heart of, at least the Japanese ones, will stay true to the heart of what Godzilla films are supposed to be. First off, apparently there is a lot of misinformation on the internet about the origin of Godzilla's name. Apparently, people said that it was just originally Gojira in Japanese, and American studios wanted to make it more like cool. So they're like, we'll call it Godzilla. And that's how we got the popularized name. This is untrue. This is a myth. Originally, the creators of Godzilla came up with a Japanese portmanteau, which they like to do a lot, of gorira, which is gorilla, and kujira, which is whale. And the idea was they are combining both the size and strength of a gorilla and whale, thus Gujira, and then which just became Americanized to Godzilla, which is the Japanese westernization team just came up with that because that's basically just what the anglicized version of Gujira is.
Okay, I can go with that.
That sounds like, the terrible naming conventions that like Japanese stuff sometimes uses.
There is also a myth, a legend, unsubstantiated, that there was a guy who worked at the studio who was like a big dude and he loved eating whale meat. And so they called him Gujira as like a gorilla whale eater guy. And then
that sounds kind of rude.
And then they basically liked that name, and so they made their giant monster that name. And then apparently the guy who they called that, he was like, "Oh, cool! They made my name into Godzilla's name. That's epic." That's apparently it's like a literal wives' tale. Like one of the wives of the producers like recounted this story. It's kind of charming in its own way, but as a person who runs many D&D campaigns, who has to come up with fake names all the time, in my experience, I would say they probably had Gorira, and they're like, that's a pretty cool name. Let's make it more like reptile-y, though. And then they decided to merge it with whale, and then it sounded like Gujira, and they're like, ooh, that sounds pretty good. Let's just do that.
Yeah. That sounds more correct based on Pokemon.
So, in the story, the original Godzilla, the Americans and the Russians are testing a bunch of nuclear bombs in the Pacific Ocean, and all of this nuclear explosion disturbs the natural wildlife of the Pacific Ocean. And from the deep depths, it awakens something very ancient. It awakens Gujira. And they made a fictional island where he is first spotted, and then this place kind of keeps coming up whenever they do a lot of like nods to the original every time they make it. So an island called Odo Island, which is a fictional Japanese island, because in American cinema we make up cities in the Midwest that don't really exist when we need like a fake place to talk about. But I guess in Japan they just make up an island that's small, and they're like, yeah, it's Odo Island. It's Kanto. It's whatever. So on Odo Island, they spot this creature for the first time. For some reason, people really care how big Godzilla is at any given point.
I mean, of course.
So in this one, he is 50 meters tall, which is pretty big.
What is that in American units?
Yeah, that's nonsense.
I believe it's like 160 feet, or maybe it's 140 feet. So it's like a 14-story building off the top of my head.
Sounds accurate.
There we go. That's a measurement I understand.
Right.
Skyscrapers.
Yeah, us in the Midwest definitely know what a 14-story tall building looks like. We see a lot of those around here.
I wish that you had done it in football fields, as that's my
Yeah,
native
can we have it
tongue,
in yards?
A meter is pretty close to a yard, so about 50 football fields.
But no, not that.
What? Oh, yeah, right. Half a football field.
Half a football field. That's not that big.
That's not that. It's not that big. It's not that big.
That's not that big. What was the problem?
I don't know.
Unfortunately, at the time, Tokyo was mostly 13 stories tall.
Something about they don't make buildings 13 stories tall. It's an unlucky number, or is it? It's a different one in Japanese. It's like
different in Japanese.
It's like 5 or something. They don't have a 5th floor because it means like
4.
death. 4? Does it mean death or whatever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Also, Tokyo was pretty much razed to the ground during World War II because of the fires and such.
There was a lot of
I can't
firebombing.
imagine the buildings are terribly tall.
It's because of the Godzillas.
It's been
9 years.
It's been 9 years, and there's been the economic miracle in Japan, so they're doing fine. But
just not more than 14 stories tall. Fine.
I don't even know if that number's right. And the more I think about putting a 14-story building on its side, the less I'm confident that it is half a football field tall. Yeah. But I'm over it. I'm past that. It's 50 meters, whatever that is in freedom units. Godzilla shows up, and Godzilla is pissed off because he was napping peacefully at the bottom of the ocean floor, and now he's been all woken up, and so he's rampaging through Odo Island. And eventually, I believe he moves to Tokyo and starts ripping the place up there. It is well documented that Godzilla is a metaphor for nuclear armament testing and nuclear armament in general, and the uncontrollable nature of the powers that be, as well as the backlash of nature to having that kind of constant bombardment of radiation. And like what it does, how it corrupts the natural order, turns it into a monster, et cetera, et cetera. And so the movie is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much Godzilla running amok. It's all about the hubris of man. And then there is a scientist known as Daisuke Serizawa, who is a doctor of technology, I guess. Anyway, he invents a device called the Oxygen Destroyer, which
sounds dangerous.
It is. It's extremely dangerous. In fact, it's even more powerful than an atomic bomb. I don't remember why he was working with it, but he is not.
Same reason why Russia and America were. So.
Well, no, he is a peaceful man. He does not approve of war.
Well, that's why we started working on the Manhattan Project.
He was doing research on something called micro-oxygen, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And I haven't seen the movie, and I don't even know if the movie would be translated. It's from the 50s. So I don't know why Dr. Serizawa was making the Oxygen Destroyer. I just know that it is a powerful weapon. Is that fair?
Yeah,
I'll suspend my disbelief.
It's a powerful weapon made by a very pacifist man.
I will prove. I will redeem Dr. Serizawa in time.
Okay.
Anyway, the Godzilla's running amok. It's a big problem now, and the Japanese government is like, we need something to defeat Godzilla, and Dr. Serizawa's team is like, Dr. Serizawa, with the power of the Oxygen Destroyer, you could, in theory, destroy Godzilla. Ooh. And he goes, no, I can't use my research. The Oxygen Destroyer is too powerful. It's too destructive. And if the world learns about its power, they're all going to want one. And it's going to be nuclear bombs 2.0. And everyone's going to have another arms race with another new, stronger thing. And it's going to be bad news. But eventually they're like, Godzilla's unstoppable, and if we don't do something, we have to do it. He's like, fine, I'll do it, but I'm gonna be there. It's my device. I know how to use it. I'm gonna be there to use it, and watch this, and then he sets fire to all his research, and he goes, now I'm the only one who knows how the oxygen destroyer works, so all the information is in my brain. And
Wow,
so
he didn't have any interns.
no one else knows how the oxygen destroyer works, and he got rid of all of his research notes, and it's all inside of his brain now. And he goes, I will help you defeat Godzilla on my own terms. And they go, all right, fine, we have no other choice. And so he takes the oxygen destroyer out, and they take a boat out into the Pacific Ocean, and they lure out Godzilla, and they go underwater. And I guess the oxygen destroyer like sends out all these bubbles, and then the bubbles are the micro oxygen, and then that is what basically like melts organic material. They used it in like, they tested it once and some fish, and the fish just turned into like fish skeletons, and then the skeletons turned into, they just dissolved.
I'm a little concerned if oxygen is what destroys organic matter.
So I think
just a little bit.
This might be a stretch, and I'm not sure about the timing of it, but this might be a reference to like hydrogen bombs. That's my take on it, is like how they're kind of the next step of bombs and how they're even more destructive. And hydrogen is like a gas, and they were just like, well, let's do like oxygen.
What's another gas?
That's a gas.
They could have gone helium.
They're making movies. Helium's very stable, Fran, as I'm sure you know. But they're making movies over here, Fran, like we've talked about before, and like I'll talk about later. People who make movies don't actually know anything about anything. True. So Dr. Serizawa tells the rest of the team, he's like, get out of here. I'm going to detonate the oxygen destroyer. It's going to kill me also, and Godzilla, and the knowledge of the oxygen destroyer will be oxygen destroyed, and no one will be able to make it, and will kill Godzilla. And then that is what he does. And he dissolves Godzilla, and Godzilla turns into a big pile of bones, and then the pile of bones dissolves away. And they achieve victory, but at the loss of many human lives. And then one of the people goes, oh, we've defeated Godzilla once and for all. And then another one goes, no, as long as mankind tests nuclear weapons, there will always be another Godzilla. And that's how the movie ends. And fortunately for us,
how heavy-handed that was.
Fortunately for us, that sets up basically 70 years worth of content.
Right, yeah. That's definitely... Do you think that they were trying to make a statement, or do you think that they were like, yes, the content machine must churn?
I really believe at this point they were just trying to make a statement. Like, it's all very planned. This is a very well crafted. If you're looking for like a good movie from the 50s, by all accounts, this is like a good one to go back to as like a time capsule, but also as like an example of a movie that has a story to tell that is told in metaphor, which is kind of a lost art. You get some of that today with things like Nope, and the other Jordan Peele movies are very steeped in metaphor and praised very highly. But a lot of times you also get other movies like the modern Godzilla movies, which don't really have a lot of messaging behind it, which we will get to. But that is the original Godzilla 1954 version, and it created an idea that was so popular it lasts strongly. Very like the impact that this has on both Japanese and American culture to this day cannot be understated.
I'm really surprised actually that it got taken from Japan and distributed in the US. Did you do any reading about how that even happened? Because
so I mean, like all things from Japan, it was a little delayed, and I think the main sell was monsters. Like that's cool. Americans like monsters, and they like. I do think that a lot of the nuance was perhaps lost on the American audience.
Absolutely.
On the American translation,
right? Which is like super important, because one of the things I want to bring up too is I obviously really like Japanese media. Like I like anime. I like the movies that come out from there. I like a lot of the like culture things they have, and I'm always going to be ingesting that media as a person from the only country that has dropped a nuclear bomb and watching media from the only country that has had a nuclear bomb dropped in it. Like there's no, I'm aware of the disconnect that I have, and like everyone else should be too. And you can like, that's part of media literacy, right? Is like understanding what the people who are making context. What the people who are making the thing are trying to say, where the people making the thing come from, what their background is. Like I am never going to know what it is like to be Japanese because I have only ever been American. And even if I try and relate via media that people make there, I'm not going to be able to understand fully because I'm not like, I just don't have that background. But I can say about the lore because that's well documented and that's timeless and ageless.
Yeah, unfortunately, Japanese media has just a lot of beautiful cultural like reference that is lost on us. Like we just don't understand here that giant anime titties mean something, you know? Like they're a metaphor probably for nuclear war.
Right. Yeah. I was about halfway through that I was starting to pick up what you were putting down. We're going to go through some of the eras because I don't want to talk about, I mean, obviously we can't. We're only going to talk about this for like an hour. And there's just so much. But like I said, they are split into the eras of Japanese emperors that they had for a while. So the original Godzilla is part of the Showa era, which is Emperor Showa.
Yep.
And then that goes all the way up to his son, which is the Heisei. I think
Heisei.
It's Heisei. The Heisei era, which came after him.
Okay.
And
his son, the TriStar.
Well,
is that what some of these notes?
So through the Heisei era, we start to get to the turn of the millennia, and that is where we are going to split up a little bit. So over the course of from 1954 up until about 1998, Godzilla was Japanese only. They only produced them in Japan. It was pretty much always a guy in a suit and, you know, scale models, smashing through buildings and stuff. And as the series as the series progressed, it became less about Godzilla as like a symbol of man's hubris. And it became more about how kick-ass it would be if Godzilla fought a bunch of other monsters.
I mean, yeah.
And
that's pretty cool.
There's all sorts of storylines about different versions of Godzilla. Like we said in the original one, the original Godzilla technically died. They have follow-up sequences where when Godzilla was killed, actually their bones were left behind, and then they cloned a new Godzilla from the bones. There's another version of the story where Godzilla just never dies. They just retreat back into the Pacific Ocean, and they show up again to fight other monsters. This is also important to note. If you are a well-read weeb, you would be very familiar with this, but Godzilla is part of a type of media that we often call Kaiju media, because Kaiju means monster in Japanese. So Godzilla would be considered one of the most recognizable Kaiju. And specifically, I guess a lot of people call them Daikaiju, which just means really big kaiju. So
I don't know if a 14-story tall Godzilla that only fills up half a football field is considered that big.
Godzilla has gotten big. That's one of the other reasons people are really concerned with how big Godzilla is, because he tends to get bigger as time goes on. A larger scale. And really, you just have to make the scale models of the city smaller to make them look bigger. And so that's actually easier. Like you have less model to build.
Or you can just have a taller man. Maybe you should go be dressed up as Godzilla.
That's actually
make a scale city around you.
There's a high demand
I think we could have
for tall white gaijin to come over to Japan and play different kaiju
you don't have
because they're bigger,
you know?
right? Yeah, and they don't care. You're in a suit.
Yeah, and they like use that American accent. You sound monstrous to us. Oh, it's awful. I love it.
Hey
You keep the
there.
models the same size, but Godzilla looks bigger.
Yeah, no, yeah. Ugh. All right.
Didn't mean to step on you there.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry about
excuse
that.
me. Excuse me. Let me
Oh.
scoot right past you.
Well, and that's another good point, Fran, because as Godzilla progresses from the original movie through the Showa, through the Heisei era, he becomes less of a unstoppable monster that is destroying Japan to a not really protector, but like the kind of lesser of two evils a lot of the time. He's like he just likes to fight other monsters. He's not as interested in destroying Japan as he is in fighting other monsters.
Okay.
So he's
Kind of like, this is my turf to destroy.
Right.
Stop it.
Exactly.
This is my area.
So
Yeah.
he's kind of like he's not the good guy. There are every once in a while like good guy kaiju that he will fight just to like be like, I don't care about you. But there's also like there tends to be more eviler kaiju who are going to destroy everything, and they're like, what if we were able to lure Godzilla into the fight and then he will take care of our problem for us? And they're like, okay. And this is the like inflection point that I really want to get across, because we're going from Godzilla being the unstoppable force of nature that exists to punish mankind's hubris for what they've done to nature, to now mankind can kind of control Godzilla enough to deal with other threats, which is in a lot of ways the literal opposite thing. Like they're not able to just like control Godzilla, but they are able to like trick Godzilla into helping them against these bigger monsters.
So and now we're seeding clouds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, so now Godzilla has gone from being a purposeful metaphor for nuclear war to an accidental metaphor for capitalism.
And Cold War, even if you could believe. So we get to the turn of the century. We're at 1998, and this is where the Japanese say, "All right, Americans, we like money, and you're going to give us some. So why don't you make a Godzilla movie? Why don't you make the 1998 American film Godzilla, in which Godzilla attacks, I believe it's New York City?
I think
probably.
so.
Yeah.
And America was like, that's cool. That's great. We love it. We're going to redesign what we think a really good Godzilla will look like, keeping in mind that Jurassic Park, the movie, has already come out.
Yes. Which now hearing Godzilla and thinking about Jurassic Park while you were talking already.
Yeah,
I feel like Michael Crichton definitely borrowed a lot.
All right, listen to me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the old ones, because we're going to get out of the old ones, and then we're going to go forward. We're not going to think about them anymore.
Okay.
But they're really fun watches. There's a lot of spin-offs that are in the Godzilla style. One of Lizzie and my favorites to watch, mostly because we watch it through Mystery Science Theater, is the Gamora series, which is Gamora is a giant turtle who is a friend to all children. Hey everybody, this is CJ from the future. Lizzie heard me say Gamora like 15 times in this recording, and then afterwards let me know that I was saying it wrong and it's actually Gamora. So just want to throw that correction in there, and I don't know, be aware it's going to be wrong a bunch more, so don't at me or whatever. And so it doesn't give a shit when all of the adults are like dying to giant monsters, but if there's little kids in danger, Gamora will show up, and Gamora flies around. It like pulls its legs inside of its shell, and then rockets come out of its shell, and it spins around through the air to get everywhere.
Holy shit. That's amazing.
It can use this ability to fly through space, which is also very cool.
Course.
Godzilla and Gamora unfortunately have never met in cinema. It's like a DC Marvel situation over there. So like they're rival companies, the Kaiju companies. But a crossover between the two would be fantastic. I don't know if this podcast has any reach over in Japan, but if anyone who can make things happen, and they have a lot of similarities. Let's talk about some of Godzilla's powers. Obviously, giant reptile. to dispel another myth, a lot of people think that Godzilla's origin story is that he was a regular lizard that got radioactive wasted and turned into a big lizard. I think this is the plot of some of the movies. But generally, Godzilla is just a big monster that lived in the Pacific Ocean.
Already lived there.
And got disrupted.
You don't know what's down there.
Right. They got disrupted by the nuclear explosions and stuff. A big one, Godzilla, as I have pronouned them through the episode, is a he. Canonically got big dick energy. This might be confusing, you might say, but CJ, doesn't Godzilla have a baby in some of them? Yeah.
He's a big ocean monster. We don't know how that shit works.
He does. Again,
male seahorses give birth.
Again, it's like I go to the altar of the content wiki and I like kneel down and pray, and then like a beam of light shines down, and then it's just like a shitty book that's it. They just like it's like wet, and they just throw it at my feet, and I flip through it, and I'm like, oh great, the community has something to say about this. Apparently there's a thing in science, real science, called
parthenogenesis,
which is the thing where a creature can replicate itself without doing sex. Which from my understanding in nature is something that I think only female creatures do. They'll just lay eggs that are already fertilized with basically genetic clones of themselves, which is very cool.
It just said on that wiki thing that you pulled up an egg or a sperm, I think.
Well, I mean, at that point, it's neither and both, because it's just going to turn into a little baby. But it doesn't matter, because Godzilla is a woke king who can lay his own eggs with babies inside of them. So yes, Godzilla does have baby Godzilla at a certain point. And yes, Godzilla's a man, and he can just do that. This is also going to be important when I talk about the 1998 one. But let's talk more about Godzilla's powers. Godzilla is a nuclear monster. He feeds on nuclear energy. This means that he tends to attack nuclear power plants because it's like a big food source. Same with bombs. They try to nuke him all the time, and he just kind of slurps it up.
So foolish.
Yummy, yummy.
Yeah, it's actually a good thing for him. In some of the movies, they nuke him to feed him. So it's just kind of like, okay, sort of, if you're trying to kill him, it's like a flawed plan from the start.
How did Japan get their hand on nukes to feed him?
Japan has nukes now. I mean,
do they?
There's a lot.
I didn't think they were allowed to.
No,
They just can't have a standing army or something.
Where would they put it, France? Such a small country.
Why would you need a standing army when you have a bunch of nukes?
When you have a bunch of nukes. Yeah, who's going to invade China? Oh, that's a little foreshadowing for the future. Finally, a very famous Godzilla power is Godzilla's atomic breath, which manifests as a laser lightning beam that shoots out of Godzilla's mouth and is often accompanied with Godzilla's back spikes, kind of like radiating energy. And it's very cool looking. It's very awesome. Cool. Godzilla also has the ability to do like what has been called a radiation pulse out of its spines, which has sort of a nebulous effect of shielding it or blasting things away or kind of just whatever it needs to do at any given time. But for the most part, Godzilla is known for being a giant reptile that is very strong, very resilient, and has a laser breath, which is called the atomic breath.
And can fuck itself.
And can fuck itself and make babies. And
as needed.
And it's very cool.
As needed.
The reason I brought up Gamora is because I don't know which came first, Gamora flying or Godzilla, but at a certain point, Godzilla does gain the ability to fly via shooting a atomic breath behind it like a jet engine, which propels it through the air, which is very cool.
Wait.
How
so it asks first?
How does it shoot it behind him?
Well, he turns around. It's in front of him, but he's like he moves backwards.
Oh, okay.
He's like breath in one
just
direction.
As Ethan imagined.
And then he flies backwards in the other direction.
Okay.
Right, yeah, so he's like ass first flying. He
is ass first, yes.
Okay, yeah. Beautiful. Love it. That's nature.
If you saw that in nature, you'd be like, majestic. Maybe there is a god. I think that's really all I had to say about the Showa and the Heisei Godzillas. They're really fun watches. They don't have a lot to say about society, but it is Godzilla fighting a lot of monsters.
Where do the other monsters come from?
That's a great question.
Space?
Yeah, so there have been storylines where Godzilla fights King Ghidorah, who is a 3-headed flying dragon. In the old stories, King Ghidorah is indeed a space dragon that comes to Earth to conquer Earth.
Western dragon, Eastern dragon.
Imagine he is sort of a Western dragon, but he has no arms. He's just got 2 more heads instead.
Okay, so not like a cloud serpent situation.
Not a cloud serpent. It's got a regular body, no arms, 3 heads, and a tail and feet.
Yeah,
okay.
You know the 3-headed dragon in the new Zelda games?
No.
He doesn't look like that one. He looks like the 3-headed dragon in the original Nintendo Zelda
I'm just
game.
gonna envision the Hydra from Hercules a little bit.
Pretty close, but with wings.
Yeah, precisely.
And before Hercules cuts off his head to make like 50.
Yeah, obviously there's not more than like.
And he's golden. He's not purple.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's very cool. He's King Ghidorah.
He's a king.
King Ghidorah.
King Ghidorah has some drip.
King Ghidorah is it's King Ghidorah, in case you're wondering what I'm saying. Sometimes they just call him Ghidorah. But he is one of Godzilla's most fearsome foes. They often rival each other in strength, and their fights come down to the wire. He, I guess, conquered Venus at one point. I guess there was a thing.
Yeah,
there's things on Venus to conquer. And
Venus is fucked up over there, man, with that runaway greenhouse effect.
Right.
Rains diamonds.
That was probably him.
Crazy.
Yeah. And this is one of the ones where he is the greater evil and humanity needs Godzilla to save them from King Ghidorah.
Venus? Oh.
Right. Yeah, basically.
Basically.
Yeah, no, so it's like on one end of the spectrum there's King Ghidorah, the 3-headed dragon from space, and then on the other end there's like a really big fucking moth,
Yeah, Mothra.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like such a big moth.
Is it a cute moth?
Yes.
There's some really cute fuzzy moths.
Mothra is the opposite of King Ghidorah. Mothra is a purely benevolent monster. And
why the hell is he fighting it?
We're going to talk about Mothra later, because I really like Mothra. But generally speaking, Mothra is there to protect humanity.
Thank you, Mothra. Big fuzzy moth.
And Godzilla's fighting him because Godzilla's not a good guy or a bad guy. He just fights other big monsters. That's his whole thing.
Right.
So,
all right.
But Mothra is Mothra's like always a good guy, always fighting on the side of preserving humanity in some way, shape, or form. There's Rodan is another big one. Rodan is like a flying pterodactyl monster. In some
I've seen that one. Yeah.
In some iterations, he's like flaming, but he's always like a big pterodactyl. I think some monsters in Pacific Rim might have a little bit of influence from some of these.
Probably, yes.
But not enough to invoke copyright. So
Of course not.
There is also I'm not going to say this right. Destroya. It's hard to pronounce.
Beautiful pronunciation. No, you were perfect.
Destroyera. That's it. Okay, it's Destroyera.
I feel like I'm saying it perfect.
I'm saying it perfect now. Destroyera is the original origin for Destroyera is all of the micro-oxygen in the water that originally killed Godzilla actually didn't fully kill Godzilla, and also it interacted with the crustaceans in the water. The shrimp in the water, and it mutated a bunch of shrimp to collect together to create a super being out of its small individual shrimp parts, and then that being coalesced together to create Destroyera.
Does it just look like a big shrimp?
No, it looks like a big,
Oh.
powerful dragon monster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
That one is notable because that, I believe, was one of the monsters that ended the Heisei era. That was one of the last big monsters that Godzilla fought, I believe. And then in many iterations, as you have already mentioned, Fran, there is some form of Mecha Godzilla. Sometimes it's called Kiryu, but it shows up all the time, and every time it has like a different origin story because it's just a big robot that looks like Godzilla.
I mean, it's great.
In some iterations, alien species kidnaps Godzilla and does experiments on it, and then creates Mecha Godzilla out of, quote, space aluminum, whatever the fuck that is.
Hell yeah.
Aluminum from space.
From space, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes
Godzilla isn't safe from abductions of aliens.
There is a really funny scene where Godzilla is just plucked up by a big like flying saucer, and like the aliens just take him.
That does sound funny.
There are aliens
big
almost.
Saucer.
There's like always aliens in Godzilla media. They're like a thing that constantly shows up. Sometimes Mechagodzilla is made by humans to protect themselves from Godzilla. So generally speaking, Mechagodzilla is kind of a good guy. It's usually working on behalf of the humans to beat Godzilla. And that's
I will like to point out that when we keep saying good guy versus bad guy, it is from the biased human lens, I presume here.
Yeah, I mean,
good as in protecting humanity and our own interests.
Right.
Right.
To allow humans to keep doing whatever they want without repercussion.
Hashtag Godzilla did nothing wrong.
As opposed to the moral grounds that Godzilla believes in. He's like, listen, my lizard god told me, go forth and multiply by yourself.
And I did. God damn did I do that. So now finally we are at the 1998 crossroads, and there's way more monsters that Godzilla has fought, but those are a lot of the notable ones, and those ones are very fun because those designs are very iconic. There's always like a Rodan type monster, just a flying monster in any like kaiju movie. There's always like a dragon type monster that falls in line with a bunch of those other stuff. And then there's usually the Godzilla types, which are the tanky ones.
Did Ridley from Metroid take inspiration from Rodan? Probably.
Ridley is, I mean, the name Ridley comes from Ridley Scott, which is the person who directed Aliens. So he's an alien from Aliens.
Yeah, he's just an alien mixed with a pterodactyl.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking pterodactyl Rodan, but it's fine.
That's good, Fran. You just wanted to tie in so that you could let the audience know to go watch the Metroid episode if you haven't seen that.
Yeah,
that's right.
Know more about Ridley and Metroid, go watch that.
So Japan is like, hey, America, go for it. We are going to let you make your own Godzilla movie.
I feel like, wow, I'm surprised. A lot of faith.
They gave money.
They
gave them money.
Yeah, a lot of money.
They paid for the rights.
Oh, yeah, a lot of money, I'm sure. I brought up that Godzilla is a man because apparently this movie is completely forgettable and is, by all accounts, very bad. Godzilla in the movie looks like a giant T-Rex. They said that they modeled it after an iguana that like is standing on two legs, but it looks exactly like a T-Rex. And again, this movie came out in the time when Jurassic Park had come out and is the cultural zeitgeist, and everyone loves dinosaur movies, and they want to just put another dinosaur into a movie, and it just looks like a big dinosaur. Notably, there was a lot of controversy because Godzilla did not have his iconic atomic breath. He expelled gas from his mouth, and then apparently they did test screenings with this, and like the gas would just like push things aside with its mighty force. And in the test screenings, they're like, this is dumb and stupid, and we think it's
That is
bad.
dumb and stupid, yeah.
Yeah.
And so in post, they made it so that the breath was flammable and exploded. But it is important to note that they added the flaming breath in post. It was just like air before then. So it's pretty dumb.
Godzilla, the Last Airbender.
They were really going for like realism, I guess, but it's stupid. It's a giant monster movie. You don't need to go for realism.
Who directed that movie? Good gracious.
And a famous controversy is, I guess, and this is from the production team, this Godzilla is a 3D render. So it is entirely a computer-generated object. As people know who work in computer-generated objects, is you have to model the whole object pretty much every time you work with that kind of stuff, because you never know what angle the camera's going to see it from, and you just want it to look good from whatever angle, so that's fine. Apparently, when they made the model to this Godzilla, they gave it a quote, and again, I'm quoting here, female genitalia. So they
female genitalia of what species?
Well, so they said this is, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is pretty much from the source. They put a lizard pussy on this giant monster.
Just like a cloaca?
I
call
guess.
That a cloaca, yeah.
And I guess you don't really see it in the movie, but based on what they said, they're like, well, we modeled Godzilla as a
upskirt shot,
because Godzilla lays a bunch of eggs in the movie, and so they're like, we made Godzilla have a big bussy, a big reptile bussy, and it's there. We modeled it. They said they modeled it.
But if it's a cloaca, that's in both sexes.
Correct.
So how do we know it's female?
Well, it's not female, because in the movie they say it's a boy.
Okay, so it's just a cloaca.
Again,
upset.
It was one of those reshoot things where they intended Godzilla to be female, and then like everything in the story kind of points to that, because she's laying eggs and she's like got a big bussy and like all of that stuff. And then they, I guess, had to do reshots of some of the scenes where they say like he's a monster, and so like they specifically put in male pronouns because they're like, Godzilla's a boy, just so you know.
That happens to lay eggs and things. Yeah.
Right. So
Godzilla
is definitely a man, just so we're all clear. He's a boy. He is the king of monsters, which is the name of one of his movies, is Godzilla, King of All Monsters. So definitely male. Don't know why that's important, but there's been a lot of online,
I don't want my cool lizard to be a girl.
Right. If my giant building stomping lizard has a pussy, then what am I to believe in? What can I believe in then? The matriarchy? I refuse.
Maybe Godzilla lost its testicles to testicular cancer, so it'd be a great spokesman for No Shave November.
It would be, but he can't speak. And also, I don't know what reptile balls look like.
Can breathe atomic. That's kind of like speaking.
Right. So
can push things to the side with his breath.
This movie was so bad and had a lot of Americans saying how bad it was, and there was a lot of pushback, to the point of Japan was like, okay guys, we're gonna make Godzilla movies again. Like,
yeah,
I don't know exactly what happened. They allowed more of these movies to be made, more of the TriStar movies, but they were like, I think the intention was, we're not going to make some Godzilla movies for a while. We'll let the Americans do it for a little bit of time, and then maybe we'll come back to it later. And this movie came out, and they're like, we're going to start making new Godzilla movies right now. And so that's why not the same time, but like shortly after the TriStar movie came out, the movie Godzilla Millennium came out, which again is like not your dad's Godzilla. This is the cool new Godzilla for the cool new generation. Things like
those millennials,
animated series tie-ins, one-off animated movies, reintroducing old monsters with new backstories, like all that kind of stuff. And the TriStar movies, I think there were 3 of them total, but I might just be seeing Tri and thinking that. But for the most part, everyone only knows the 1998 version. I know it as a movie that my grandma had. That is the first Godzilla movie I ever saw. And I was like, I don't know why people like this. And so I just thought Godzilla was that for a while. So it's fun. I have a tendency to introduce myself to a series in the worst part of the series and then just assume the whole thing is like that. So
that was also my first Godzilla
right, because
experience.
it was the American one. It was the first American one.
It was the American one. It came out when I was 7. It was just like,
right,
I want to see the movie with the big lizard monster.
It's bad. Godzilla lays a bunch of eggs in Madison Square Garden, and then they blow them up with missiles. That's pretty much, and then Godzilla gets upset. So the Millennium Era saw a bunch of revitalized Godzilla movies, which went all the way through 2016, which is fairly recently. Yeah. And at this point, we come to the newest era of Godzilla content in which we are currently living. We made it. We're all the way back to now. We have the Japanese studio, which is Studio Toho, which is still releasing new Godzilla content. I believe the most recent Godzilla movie was Godzilla -1, which just came out very recently. It follows along the tradition of the Japanese Godzilla movies. So this is where we get to have fun, because now we're in the common era, and as we know, all media used to be good and is bad now, and this one is no different, because Fran, what you said at the beginning of the show is absolutely right. Everything's got to have a contiguous universe now. Do you actually not know about the Godzilla universe?
Me?
Yeah.
I know... I know, like, it's Godzilla and King Kong and stuff like that. It's just like the big monsters.
If I told you that Godzilla does indeed have a cinematic universe and it has a name, can you guess Godzilla's cinematic universe name?
Is it the Godzilla cinematic universe?
No, Fran, you're thinking too hard.
Is it the Kaiju cinematic universe?
You're much closer, Fran.
Is it just the monster cinematic universe?
Fran, I'll give you credit for that one. Godzilla has come back to America, back to our warm welcome embrace, in none other than the Monsterverse, the collection of movies that have Godzilla as part of them. And it is indeed a cinematic universe that now includes the likes of King Kong. And as of now, again, the newest movie in the Monsterverse, the 5th Monsterverse movie, is going to come out next year. Right now, there's 4 movies, and they include Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Kong, Mothra Rodan, Mechagodzilla, and a creature known as a Muto. Let's get into it. So...
Isn't that a brand?
So it kind of feels like that.
A motto? Maybe I'm thinking a motto.
Also the American. So after the Millennium Era, the modern Japanese Godzilla era is called the Reiwa era. So that's what we're in right now. For Japan, they're still releasing stuff.
Who has the rights to the Monsterverse here? Is it Universal?
It's joint distribution between Toho and Warner Brothers.
Oh. All right.
There you go.
Interesting.
Yeah, whatever.
So when's the Bugs Bunny crossover happening?
Yeah, I was gonna say
we're gonna have a Space Jam with Godzilla, please.
What wasn't Kong? No, that's how I knew, because Kong was in the new Space Jam, wasn't he? He was in the background. Yeah, he was like with the. He was like with the Iron Giant. He was like with the Iron Giant. Yeah. Let's talk. I have to talk about the Monsterverse. I have to.
I'm excited.
It came. So you remember the dark cinematic universe, the one where they thought
the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
right? And then
Connery.
And then that failed, and then they tried again to make that with the Tom Cruise Mummy movie, where they fucked up the audio in the trailer, and then that was a non-starter again. And I, for the life of me, thought that was called the Monsterverse, because it was like with the Mummy.
So did I, actually.
Right, it was like with the Mummy and like Jekyll and Hyde and like I know Frankenstein's probably in there. I don't fucking know.
Probably. It's all those monsters.
But no, the MonsterVerse is very successful and still going to this day. So 2014 rolls around and Japan says, fine, America, it's been a while. It's been, 16 years since your first shot. We're going to give you another shot to do an American reboot of the series Godzilla. And if you do a good job, you can make a cinematic universe out of it. And they were like, all right, guys, we're playing.
Hell yeah.
We're playing.
That's the new hotness.
We're playing for keeps now, okay? At this point, Marvel is making Boku dinero, and we're gonna be next.
Godzilla's gonna be the leader of the Avengers. It's gonna be amazing.
I'm bringing all these up as I'm like bringing up these movies. I'm also bringing up a lot of the other things that were in the cultural zeitgeist for a very important reason, and it's something I'm going to get into right now, and it's something that I have noticed. This is my hot take for the episode, and right. I say hot take because it was insightful enough for Lizzie to, when I told her about it as I was describing this, be like, oh yeah, that's a good point. And
oh no.
And so I'm gonna.
She usually, every time you open your mouth, she's like, usually just like, "You fucking dumbass."
But now, I was like, I was watching Godzilla. It's just called Godzilla, which is confusing, but Godzilla parentheses 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching it yesterday for the first time. She was like, I think I've seen this in theaters and I think it's really bad and boring. And I was like, well, I'll be the judge of that. And it starts out really bad and boring. It's like so boring. And then I'm watching it and it has the most insane decisions in a monster movie I have ever seen in my whole life. It does this thing where it like builds up this tension about like they don't know what Godzilla is. Oh, a couple people do know what Godzilla is. What could Godzilla's motives be? What's going on? I don't know what's happening. And then there's eventually two big monsters and they collide for the first time and they literally take one swipe at each other and it cuts and immediately goes to the day after and like the wreckage of everything they've created. And I was like, wait,
but that's the cool part.
I was like,
what?
Are you? And Lizzie's like, yeah, I told you they just don't show monsters in this movie. And I was like, I thought you were using hyperbole. And she's like, no, they literally just don't show monsters. And then a second time they start in Japan and they like collide for the first time. And then they move to Oahu, Hawaii, and then they're like colliding again and the monsters start fighting each other. And for a second time, it is from the perspective of a bunch of people who are like hiding in a bunker and the like bunker closes and then it cuts to when they're already gone again. And I'm like, are you insane? Like they're not showing any of the monsters fighting each other.
That's and then what people go for.
And then I looked it up and I had an epiphany. And I think you're going to like this, Ethan, because this is very good.
Okay.
You know what basically one of my favorite movies of all time is because we've talked about it a lot. And I think that Pacific Rim is unironically one of the best movies ever made. Okay. And I know for a fact that Guillermo del Toro, the director of that movie, who only puts out bangers, by the way, banger after banger after banger, I know that he is inspired by the like Godzilla kaiju movies, like the OG stuff. He talks about how, I mean, whenever he makes any movie, he talks about how he's like inspired by the older version of that movie and how he distills that down and makes his movie based on that, but with nice modern sensibilities, but still keeping the spirit of the old stuff. And that's really smart because in Pacific Rim, it works brilliantly because you have a kaiju movie with his like big monsters fighting big robots. And it's very cool. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to suspend your disbelief because it's silly enough where you're like, I don't care too much about this, but it's like takes itself seriously enough where you're like, I'm still invested in what's going on. This is awesome. Idris Elba's bleeding out of the nose. What's happening there? I don't know. We'll see.
You could say that Guillermo del Toro's movies are analog, nuclear.
Okay, no, but this is no, Ethan. You don't understand. You don't understand, Ethan. This is my exact argument because I think for Guillermo del Toro took all of the Godzilla movies and distilled it into the perfect Godzilla movie, which isn't a Godzilla movie. It's Pacific Rim. And then another movie came out before this 2014 reboot. Famously, a year before this movie came out, a little film called Cloverfield came out. And Cloverfield is all about a giant monster that attacks New York, but you almost never see it because it's a suspense movie. It's all about the drama, all about the human interactions.
Hold on. Side note before you get into your hot take, I'm sorry, you're building up. Do you guys remember the marketing campaign for that fucking movie?
No, I was
you remember like you were in college?
Yeah, I was the most depressed I've ever been.
Okay. But well, just so you know, there was like Easter eggs and stuff on the internet for Cloverfield for like 2 years before the movie came out.
Yeah.
And it was back in the day where you could have like websites with like Easter eggs and you have to like dig into the source code to find new things to like
they call those ARGs now.
What?
ARGs, you don't know about that?
Why are they called ARGs?
You remember in I don't remember what it stands for, but you remember in Tunic where you have to like go to a physical website once you solve all their puzzles?
Yeah.
That's like a common thing they do in video games. It's called ARGs. It's when you like integrate real world. Usually they'll put like scavenger hunts and stuff and like physical like geocaches somewhere.
Got it.
Another big famous one that does it really well pretty recently is Inscription. That had so they actually like went out into the woods and like buried a case with a cassette disc in it. And someone went out, so like they figured out the clues in the game or whatever. Someone went out there and actually found it. It was pretty cool.
See, back in the day, that would just be on 4chan, and it was the geolocation of like a dead body.
Yeah, people still like to do that. It's just everything's so corporate now.
Sorry, go ahead, go to your hot take. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Cloverfield marketing was just wild at that time.
No, it's brilliant because people remember that Cloverfield was really successful. I believe that they watched Cloverfield and they watched Pacific Rim before they made this movie. And they're like, everyone likes these. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bunch of elements from each of them and put them into our movie. And then everyone's going to like this movie. So why do I have this theory? Well, one, they almost never show Godzilla. There's this big suspense, but the way that they made Godzilla is basically a one-to-one modern recreation of the original Godzilla with very little changes. Like a lot of the versions of Godzilla are like modified a little bit for whatever time they're in. This one is very close to the original. It's just all CGI.
Okay.
So they're almost never showing you the monster, which doesn't work for Godzilla because everybody knows what Godzilla looks like. So you just feel blueballed, like you want action and it's not there.
Well, that's why the Cloverfield worked, because we didn't know it was a monster movie.
Number two,
it started being released.
Number two, the original monster that they have for this movie, which is called the Muto, as I have referenced. I think, and this is, I haven't seen Cloverfield, but if I have, I still really wouldn't have seen the Cloverfield monster. But I've seen renders of the Cloverfield monster. The Muto from this movie looks a lot like the Cloverfield monster, in my humble opinion. It's got the like, big claw spindly arms that like come down. It's got like a really big torso, but it's really high up, so you almost never see it. It's got like a really stout head that's close to its body. It's not one-to-one by any means, but it is real close in how it looks.
Maybe they use the same like skeleton frame for the animation.
Yeah, and it moves around kind of like that. The third and the most damning evidence, and I love this because this is how I know Guillermo del Toro's a genius, is that one of the Muto's power in the movie is that it releases an electromagnetic pulse which destroys all electronics in a radius around it. And one of the United States' government, this one's attacking the United States, by the way, because it's an American movie.
Yeah.
And the United States' government response to this is, we need to nuke it, but we can't use our regular nuke because it would just fry all the electronics on it. So what do? We make a clockwork analog timer that we attach to our nuclear device that will allow it to go off without electricity. So how does this bomb work? It's analog. Doesn't use digital technology, which is 1-to-1 the plot point in Pacific Rim where they're like, we need, and then, but there was more in that. Well, at a certain point, the bomb is like knocked aside by the monster because the monster eats radiation. It's trying to eat the bomb. They retrieve the bomb's damaged, and they're like, the bomb's gonna go off. This clockwork design that we put onto the bomb can't be disarmed unless our main character was some sort of bomb defusal expert who could defuse analog bombs because he was there when we rigged the analog bomb, which is how the movie ends, by the way. But he also doesn't defuse it. It just goes off also, by the way, but whatever. Anyway, but that was like the crux of the movie is like, we have an analog bomb that can kill this EMP giant monster. And I'm like, you bastards. Guillermo is rolling in, well, not his grave. He's rolling in his easy chair. He is... They took his beautiful idea, his genius idea. They turned it horrible. It's awful. I saw this part and I was like, okay, I know they're stealing from Pacific Rim. There's already been hints that they were stealing from Pacific Rim, but this one is by far the worst. There's like a moment where the Muto is like fighting and then he just grows big wings and flies away. And I'm like, that's from Pacific Rim. I saw that scene. So I'm very angry that they stole from him.
I'm sure he's very happy that you're angry on his behalf.
Guillermo, I am here to bat for you. I know you're a genius, and Pacific Rim is legitimately, unironically, one of my favorite movies.
Okay, so CJ, you told me about some pretty crappy American Godzilla movies, but we were supposed to stay positive this one.
Okay.
Can you tell me about some fucking American Godzilla that rips ass?
Yeah, all right. So I will say
a little more enthusiasm, but okay.
I want to point out, and I wrote this in my notes because it made me really angry, because it's not often that I know anything about anything, but this one...
But it is often that you're angry.
This one gets me a little upset because I think the moral of they were trying to pull from the original Godzilla, where the original Godzilla says, maybe atomic bombs are bad, both for the environment and for humanity, if you can believe.
Mm-hmm.
This Godzilla, I think, was trying to make a point also, but its point was more nuclear power is bad, or like just the prospect of nuclear stuff is bad. And the reason that I think it says this is because, well, the specifically, I said I wrote in my notes. Specifically, what I said in my notes is this movie doesn't know anything, because it doesn't know what the audience wants to see. It doesn't really know the story.
No, they do, CJ. They watch Cloverfield and they watch Pacific Rim. And they put those together.
Bryan Cranston's in this movie, and I will say,
I do remember that.
Bryan Cranston,
and everyone loves Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston's in this movie. Elizabeth Olsen is in this movie, and the guy who plays Kick-Ass is in this movie. And I have nothing bad to say about their performances. Are actually legitimately, unironically, very good. I think they've done a very good job.
Wasn't this also at the peak of Breaking Bad hype too?
Maybe. It was in 2014. So I don't know.
Sounds about right.
And Bryan Cranston is speaking very bad Japanese in this movie, which I like. I know he's a good actor because I do not know if he is speaking very bad Japanese on purpose or on accident, because he is like a white guy in Japan. So I don't know if he is just being...
Did he make the artistic choice?
I don't know, because his
poorly, or
I know this for a fact. His first line in the movie is when he's answering a telephone and he says moshi moshi, and I know that if you speak fluent Japanese, you don't say moshi moshi, you say moshi mosh, because if you say moshi moshi, you sound like a fucking dweeb. So I don't know. Maybe he's doing it on purpose to sound like a white guy who doesn't know Japanese very well. The fact that I don't know means he's a good actor. That's all I know. And Elizabeth Olsen is on the upswing. I think she's getting ready to do a bunch of Marvel Cinematic Universe movies at this point, and she is doing a very good job. She's playing a worried mother for both her husband and child. Very compelling stuff. No notes. I think she did a great job. The script, though, which is not their fault, is no good. It's so the thing that I got really angry about, I was getting more and more angry as the movie was going on because they were like setting up these big monster fights. They weren't happening. They start in Japan, and then this Muto shows up. Muto is an anagram, by the way. Acronym.
There you go.
So Muto is short for massive unidentified terrestrial organism. And I hate this because you just know that the stupid ass producers who made this movie were like, we're going to make a whole bunch of these. We want to make them like a science-y category instead of just like silly Japanese names or whatever. Because even when they introduce Godzilla as having the name Godzilla, they have the one Japanese guy in the cast being like, yes, we've known about him since the 1950s, and my people call him Gojira. And I was like, nice. That's pretty. That's
cool.
A
fun little callback in that script. That's good. That's a good time.
But like all the new monsters are like, oh, well, they're like, our scientists are observing them, and we're like categorizing them, and we call them mutos because we're the American military, and we do shit like that. And I'm like, just fuck off, guys. It's just name them cool things. What the fuck?
I mean, the American military, famously unfun.
Maybe
very true.
Maybe it's because I watched too much Kids Next Door as a youngin', but I always love a good dumb acronym.
This one sucks, but the story of the original one is there's two Mutos, one that wakes up in Japan and one that wakes up in America in the Nevada desert, and they're a mating pair, and one is calling to the other, and so the one goes from Japan over to America, crossing over Oahu in the middle. Our heroes are constantly like intersecting this in like super unlikely ways, and the main thing is that Godzilla hears the call between these two creatures and is like chasing after them. He wants to fight them. So it does set up in this first one.
Just wants to fight them.
Well, what is
husband and wife just trying to get it on.
The lore that we know
what a cock block.
The lore we know in this one that they set up for the rest of the series is this one sorry, I have to take a breath because this is actually we're in prime lore territory right now. So in the ancient past, around 65 million years ago or so, the Earth was apparently very radioactive.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
That's not true, but so this radioactivity allowed for giant creatures that will eventually be known as Titans because we're making media in the 2010s. What are we doing here? They're called Titans. There were large creatures known as Titans, which fed off of the radioactivity, and through this energy, they were able to become very big. And what we know about the Titans is that they were territorial apex predators. They wanted to fight each other to prove who was the alpha. And what we know is that in the ancient past, Gojira was one of these Titans who was driven down towards the Earth's core as the radiation levels on the surface began to decrease, and they instead decided to go and basically hibernate deep under the ocean where there is more radiation because it's closer to the Earth's core, and there's a hollow Earth, by the way. The Earth is hollow.
Oh, hollow Earth theory? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, this
hollow Earth fact.
Right. This one we've got hollow Earth, and the hollow Earth has a bunch of that nuclear energy in it. And so all of the Titans that were still around went deep towards the center of the Earth to hibernate to get enough of that good nuclear radiation energy to survive, but basically lie dormant for millions of years.
From Earth's famously radioactive core. Yep.
Yeah. I love this shit, man. I love that in
No, this is
America-
actually really good. Let me tell you what.
This is I love in American media that like just the idea of alphas can be a major plot point.
Yeah.
It's like, well, clearly they would want to show dominance, and
Right.
so
They're
that's
big men.
why.
Well, that's how we relate to the male audience in American media.
That's
right?
plot, right?
Yeah, that makes
Well,
that makes me feel invested. I'm like, what? Which
Why
one is
makes-
the alpha? It's important to
Yeah.
me to know.
Why
It
does
makes men really be able to relate to the media, because when it's like Turning Red, where it's about a girl getting like reaching like puberty and stuff like that, I can't relate to that shit.
No,
But
I don't know how to do
Alpha
that.
Monster
Yeah.
Titans.
Which
Yeah.
monster's
Together.
alpha? Which one's
Relate
sigma?
to
Which
that
one's
shit.
beta?
exactly? I mean, like Optimus Prime and the Decepticons they're gonna fight. I just want to know which one of them has the bigger dick.
Right.
And
we
that's
know
like-
his name's Optimus Prime, which is like, that's an alpha name. That's why I named my child, my firstborn child, male or female. Great. So then
Yeah.
we fast forward from the ancient past. We're now in 1945. Oopsie, America does a war crime onto Japan and detonates 2 nuclear bombs. The nuclear fallout from these bombs awakens Gojira. He becomes a little curious. He says, oh, nuclear energy is up and about again. I guess I'll go check it out. Comes to the surface. They spot him for the first time near Odo Island. Reference to the original movie.
That's cute.
Yeah,
I'm happy they at least did that in the script.
Yeah, it's
Seems
you know,
to be some good references.
they
I
acknowledge
love
it.
references.
Now we get to the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory parts.
The Hollow Earth?
America, well, that's part of it. America and
That's
Russia saw Gojira. They witnessed Gojira come up. They were performing nuclear tests in the ocean? No. They were bombing the ocean, trying to kill Gojira.
Were they trying to kill him or feed him?
They were trying to kill Gojira. They were scared of Gojira, and so they kept
They
bombing
just
the
kept throwing
ocean.
shit in there. That sounds pretty American.
Those weren't
Yeah.
nuclear tests. Those were nuclear strikes against Gojira. But they couldn't get him.
So to be clear, the Cold War was actually a hot war against Gojira.
Gojira.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
A worldwide secret organization is formed called Monarch to watch these titans, specifically Gojira, but there was also other titans observed in the wild that were also lying dormant that they wanted to keep tabs on. And so they create this organization called Monarch to basically watch all the titans. The only active one they know about, though, is Gojira. He's in the Pacific Ocean, just swimming around, waiting, I guess, for something to fight. He is waiting for something to fight.
He's just sitting, swimming in the ocean like, I'm the biggest, baddest motherfucker around. Some other guy shows up, I'm gonna fucking punch his face and tell him I'm the biggest, baddest.
Well, that's the great news for Gojira, because the Muto awakens. As we learn, the Muto is an ancient parasitic organism that would lay its eggs in the inside of other titans, and then they would burst out like chest bursters.
So, okay, hold on. From the way this classification is, it sounds like Muto is a classification, but now you're making it sound like it's a specific critter.
Yeah, it is a
So
specific.
is Muto a specific critter? Then give it a fucking name.
Well, later
Not a classification.
Later, I think they realized that people thought that an acronym for one thing was stupid, and they clearly were going to use this as like a blanket term, but they never really caught on. So I do believe, and this is just from my own research, I think eventually they come back around to calling this creature the Jinsen Mushi, which means something beetle, because it kind of is like a big armored insect looking thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they do eventually give it a Japanese name that's kind of in line with what we would expect from a Godzilla monster. But yeah, this is the only thing known as a Muto, and there is another Muto that's a female Muto. The male Muto is much smaller but can fly. The female Muto is way bigger and has a thick egg sac that we see sometimes, filled with eggs. Yeah.
That's hot.
And they're calling to each other. They're starting to wake up again from all the nuclear energy. The nuclear power plant in Japan is waking up the Muto that lies dormant underneath Japan. And it's like waking up and calling to its mate. Yes, it was by the Fukushima disaster. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second too. But yes,
listen,
again,
focus on the more important stuff.
Context is also important for media literacy. We just talked about this.
Yeah, this is, again, it really feels like anti-nuclear stuff. And I'll say this: the whole story is the male Muto is trying to get to the female Muto who's in America. Godzilla is chasing down the male Muto, trying to fight it because this is a parasitic species that would basically lay eggs in Godzilla's prehistoric species. And so they're like natural enemies. He wants to fight it and kill it.
Or he just wants to prove that he's the more alpha Chad and cuck this Muto, even if he's not going to actually fuck that sheep.
Well, that's the beauty of art. It's up to the interpretation of the audience.
that is beautiful.
Whatever you best relate to.
I agree. You're right. So this movie's really boring. It's mostly about this military guy and his dad, Bryan Cranston, and like they thought that this was like a nuclear disaster when the one guy was a kid, but it actually turns out it wasn't. It was this Muto, and it got covered up by Monarch because they don't want the populace to know about Titans and all this other stuff. And then Godzilla's fighting, and he's just trying to kill these other Mutos. And it all coalesces in this big moment where
you don't get to see the monsters fight.
Well, they're fighting, but the Mutos are going towards the American shore. They're going towards San Francisco. And that's where the main character's family lives, Elizabeth Olsen and their kid. And he's like, I got to do something to save them. They're going to destroy the Golden Gate Bridge because this is a movie that takes place in San Francisco. So the Golden Gate Bridge is going to get destroyed.
Of course.
They were like, where is this monster going? Why would he go to America? And they're like, well, the Muto is trying to feed, and it feeds off radioactivity. Where would it go? It's going to go to where us foolish humans put all of our radioactive waste that we didn't want into the Yucca Mountain radioactive waste repository.
Oh.
And this is the part where I audibly got very upset because as a student of the physics, I know a little bit about this. And so here is what it is. I do know the Yucca Mountain radiation waste facility is a real place, and it was designed very specifically to be the repository for all of America's nuclear waste. So we don't know what to do with it. We don't have a good idea of how to handle it. We're going to bury it deep underground for a long time until we figure out what to do with it.
Or just leave it there.
That's the decision that we made. And then we surveyed the entire continental United States. We said, where can we put all this stuff? And a bunch of geologists decided that Yucca Mountain in the middle of the desert, best place to put all this stuff. There's nothing there. There's not going to be any problem. There's no earthquakes. There's no tornadoes. There's no storms. It's just like totally secure. It's going to be fine. We're going to build this multi-million-dollar facility here to store all of our nuclear waste. Great. And I guess the thing they didn't think about, how do you fucking get it there, guys? Do you put it in a truck? What if the truck crashes? Do you put it on a train? What if the train derails? You definitely don't want to put it on an airplane. That's not going to go well. You put it in a helicopter? What if a terrorist wants to do terrorism? So I know for a fact there is nothing in the Yucca Mountain facility. They built it. They spent about $100 million on it, and there's nothing there. But this movie is just like, oh, they're going to go for the one place where mankind was so foolish to store all its radioactivity that it doesn't know what to do with in Yucca Mountain. But there's no radiation there. Every single piece of radioactivity that is made from a facility is stored on site. So if anything, they should just be going to any of the nuclear facilities that exist in the United States, but they don't, because the stupid writers who wrote this read about Yucca Mountain, which is a big like controversy. They wanted to cut funding because people are like, we don't want nuclear stuff. It's very scary. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to like deal with it or anything like that. And they took that controversy and they just jammed it into their movie, and they had no idea what they were talking about. There's nothing there. It's a mountain with a hole in it.
God, that was so much nerd shit. I want to hear about the monkey.
All right, you can hear about the monkey, Ethan. Godzilla kills the Muto is how that story ends. He shoots a plasma. Godzilla has plasma breath in this one, so he shoots a plasma breath. He like pries open the mouth of the Muto and like just jams a bunch of radiation into there. That you've probably seen the meme where it's like Godzilla like shooting the beam into the other thing. But that's that movie. Very bad, very boring, not very interesting, not true to Godzilla, doesn't know what the fuck it's talking about, doesn't have a plan. And I bring up how bad this is because I'm not going to talk about them because I don't know that much about them, and I think you should watch this for yourself. But again, at the same time as these movies are coming out, there's the Reiwa era, the stuff that's coming out of Japan. Shin Godzilla is a lot of people's favorite Godzilla movie of all time. Wow. It is not part of the MonsterVerse continuity. It's a standalone Godzilla movie that has its own story to tell. And it is, by all accounts, very good. It also came out after the Fukushima disaster. It has a lot more, I think, intellectual points to make about that. My perspective is, what are you going to do for electricity if not something nuclear? I don't think we should be afraid of it. I think we should research it more. But I know that it's a scary thing. Again, this is where I'm saying I'm from America, where we have not had a lot of nuclear disasters. People in Japan probably have a very different opinion, what with the bombings and the Fukushima thing. And so I understand, but I think that the Shin Godzilla movie is, by all accounts, a way better movie.
Monkey.
And you should go see it. And there's a bunch of animes that have come out that are also in that continuity that are also pretty good. MonsterVerse, Godzilla happens. Afterwards, the movie Kong Island happens.
Is that the one with, is The Rock in that one?
No, you're thinking of Jumanji.
Jumanji.
No, you're not. You're thinking of what's the video game, Ethan, with the three boys that destroy the city? You play as a big monkey and a reptile and a rat. And you destroy a city together.
Rampage.
Yeah, you're thinking of the Rampage movie that did star The Rock and has a giant monkey in it.
Okay.
No, Kong comes out. It's a movie about Kong. He lives on Skull Island. Guess what? He's a Titan, turns out, in the same universe. At the end of Kong, they have a post-credit scene because the Marvel movies have already come out, and so they know how to do storytelling. And they're like, so you know about Kong, huh? Well, Kong ain't the only one in this Avengers initiative. And then they show a slideshow that shows ancient cave paintings of Godzilla fighting a three-headed monster and a giant moth creature. And they go, Kong's just the tip of the iceberg. And then we skip forward. There's also Godzilla, King of the Monsters. That movie is just Godzilla fighting a bunch of monsters. I really think that they got feedback from the first Godzilla movie, and they were like, people didn't like that he didn't fight enough monsters. And they're like, fine, well, I'm fight like 8 or 10 monsters. And you know what? Great. Notable things in that one. There is a big egg that has lied dormant that is now reawakening because Godzilla is running around, and that egg hatches into a big caterpillar. That big caterpillar hides underneath a waterfall and pupates, and as it emerges, it becomes Mothra. And it is cute. It's a good Mothra. Yeah. Mothra's in this movie, a helper to humanity, as always. Again, we lose the plot because these monsters are supposed to represent nature's ultimate power over us. We can't control nature. They invent a device called the Orca, which can basically control monsters and tell them to help them whenever they need them to. So there's no lessons here. Godzilla fights monsters. Sometimes monsters fight with Godzilla. They discover a monster that was covered in the Antarctic, which they call Monster Zero. They say Monster Zero is one of the most fearsome monsters. A bunch of eco-terrorists want to revive him and have him bring about the new age of the Titans so that they will strike away humanity from the Earth and let the Earth heal. Monster Zero turns out to be King Ghidorah. In an ancient fight with Godzilla, Godzilla was able to
trap him all the way to Antarctica?
Well, he was able to trap him underneath like an ice floe, and he's been laying dormant there ever since. King Ghidorah shows up, and again, all the Titans are apex territorial predators. So King Ghidorah is now asserting itself as the alpha, which Godzilla takes exception to. Basically how it works is Godzilla is king of the monsters, as is the title of this movie. Mothra is also known as queen of the monsters. She's
cute.
And she's loyal to Godzilla in this incarnation.
Oh, interesting.
She recognizes Godzilla's alpha authority, but the other...
like any good queen would.
Exactly. But the other monsters recognize King Ghidorah as the alpha, and so they are also fighting Godzilla. One of the monsters that wakes up was lying dormant in a volcano known as the Flaming Terror, which is...
Rodan?
Rodan shows up also and joins the side of King Ghidorah, and they have a 4-way monster battle at one point where it's
so we've got a turf war going on. Which
exactly.
It's
Godzilla and Mothra versus Ghidorah and Rodan, and it's pretty cool. And this is another thing that's like lost in the Japanese versions of Godzilla and never really came over to America. They have a lot more like mysticism and spiritualism around a lot of these monsters. In several of the Japanese incarnations, there are like mediums or psychics who can commune with the monsters, and who can like beseech them to help them out and stuff like that. That's how they communicate with them a lot of the times. The American ones are a lot more like technology, military, obviously focused.
Yeah.
And so like in Japan, Mothra is actually a like deified figure. She is like she is like an ancient spirit who can reincarnate whenever Mothra dies. She lays like another egg, like a phoenix, and retains all of her previous memories, and like revives as Mothra once again. And her ability is like Heaven's Light, where her wings will like glow and it will like restore life to natural things and stuff like that. And there's no like science explanation for that. That's just like what it is in Japan, is she's like a spiritual being. In America, not as much, but basically Mothra sacrifices herself to give her energy to Godzilla. Godzilla uses that energy to win the fight against King Ghidorah and Rodan. He doesn't kill Rodan, he just defeats him. Actually, Mothra like stabs him Mothra also has like a bee stinger, which is not what moths have, but
no,
it's what Mothras have.
Mothra incapacitates Rodan with her bee stinger, and then she eats so King Ghidorah also has like an energy blast from its mouth.
Of course.
It's called the gravity wave, which is cool. I think that's just cool. Back from the fact that it used to be an alien monster. But Mothra eats its gravity wave to protect Godzilla, and then sacrifices herself as she dissolves to like impart him with all the radiation energy that empowers him and turns him into burning Godzilla. That's another trope. That's another trope that Godzilla has, is every once in a while when he gets super powered, he'll become burning Godzilla, which is basically the same thing, but he is like red and on fire and is more powerful.
No, cool. Do the Japanese love having different power stages?
I just immediately flashed back to Digimon, actually.
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely like that we're keeping the good tropes alive, where the female, even in the monster universe, the female character does need to sacrifice her life so that the male character can have character growth.
She does lay another egg after she dies in a post-credit scene to signify that she will live again. That's another thing coming from the wiki of like the community being like, one of the reasons Mothra is not afraid of death is because she knows she can reincarnate as an egg. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I don't.
That's precisely why I'm also not afraid of death. Because as a woman,
right. As a woman, I will simply reincarnate as one of my eggs.
That's why we have so many of them.
Right. Just in case. This sets up at the end of the Kong movie and at the end of the Godzilla movie, these two are going to fight.
Hell yeah.
So we get finally...
How big is Godzilla now?
So Godzilla is the
he's
size...
still only 50 yards long?
He's much taller than even the tallest skyscrapers in Japan. So he's very tall. Also, Godzilla is not... Or King Kong is not that big. But one of my favorite parts is at the beginning of the Godzilla vs. Kong movie, they're like, wow, Kong has really grown. And I'm like, okay, you just want to make him bigger so he's the same size as Godzilla. That's cool.
Yeah, well, he had to be small enough that he could hang off the Empire State Building without like cracking
without
it,
just like snapping it over. But now he could just like topple it over. He's way bigger.
Okay.
Finally, we get to Godzilla vs. Kong, Ethan, what you finally wanted. But there's honestly not much to talk about here. It's a pretty fun movie. I watched this one. I was enjoying it pretty much the whole time through.
All right, CJ, there's not much to talk about in this movie. Could you maybe tell me, for example, how would King Kong best Godzilla's atomic breath attack?
Listen, all right. I was watching this movie while Ethan was listening to me talk about it, and I was like, I feel like there were a bunch of producers in a producer room, and they're like, King Kong wouldn't win against Godzilla. Godzilla would simply use his laser breath and kill him. We're at Godzilla vs. Kong. They put King Kong in a big Truman Show dome, which is weird because they're still on Skull Island, which is where Kong lives, but they're trying to hide Kong from Godzilla because they know that if Godzilla senses Kong, he will come to fight Kong for alpha supremacy, and that's bad news. So they're hiding him in a Truman Show dome.
Is Skull Island like habited besides Kong?
Well, that depends on how far back you want to go.
Yeah, there's apparently like some human tribes,
some natives.
Yeah, there's
okay.
I didn't watch the Kong movie,
it's a
but
bad question to ask, Fran.
In Godzilla,
if it's not like
in Godzilla versus Kong,
they can just fight there, right?
In Godzilla versus Kong, there's a girl who can't speak, but she can use sign language, and then she communicates with Kong. And so she's like a native because she's a native Pacific Islander. And honestly, I'm just happy that for once they have a person who's in tune with nature that isn't just like an American Indian. So like, cool, it's a Pacific Islander. She can communicate with Kong. That's great. She's like a little girl. And they're trying to protect him from Kong. There's a bunch of conspiracy. I hate this. The one thing I don't like about this movie is they do the thing where they're like, I've been watching a Flophouse podcast, and in there they always talk about how they don't like it when movies validate the idea that there's like a crazy person who's like, I know the truth, I'm going to ostracize all my friends and family, and then they are proven correct in the end because it just encourages people to think like that. And ever since they brought that up, I've also been noticing that. And this is one of those movies where there are several characters who are like, you don't understand. I know the Hollow Earth is real. I know that there's a conspiracy theory involving this corporation and the government, and it's all
birds aren't real,
it's
and they're
all-
surveilling us
it's
from the
all-
government.
and like literally one of the guys is a conspiracy theorist who has a conspiracy theory podcast, and he talks about how he needs to like shower in bleach and stuff to get the like government chips off of him. And he's like, I know this corporation is doing something evil. And then he's proven right at the end. I don't know if he's proven right about the bleach thing, but he's proven right about the government conspiracy thing. He's like, I don't drink tap water because it has fluoride in it, and the government uses that to keep us docile. And like the fact that they make this guy like know anything is like insane. It drives me crazy. But this conspiracy guy is like, this new corporation called Apex is doing something wild and is making Godzilla crazy. Because if you remember in the previous Godzilla movie, he's the savior of humanity because he killed the Mutos and then he just fucked back off to the ocean. So they think he's a savior, but now he's attacking places unprovoked. And they're like, oh, Godzilla's actually a big monster. Whoops, we were wrong. But it turns out Apex is doing science on a big machine, and that machine is sending out communication waves in the same kind of way that the Mutos were, basically saying, come fight me, bro, you little fucking bitch. And that's making Godzilla go crazy again. Also, they're trying to get to Hollow Earth separately. And Godzilla wants to fight Kong. He can sense Kong now. And so they're like, we got to get Kong to Hollow Earth. He'll be safe there. He'll enjoy it there more. And that takes care of our... Yeah, so he lives on Skull Island, which is apparently like it's the whole thing of like, this is what the Earth used to look like a long time ago. It's the perfect habitat for Kong.
Before it was touched by man, yeah.
And the same thing is true about Hollow Earth, except it's way bigger. So they're like, he'll have a bigger home. It's like a better habitat for him. And
we're just trying to upgrade the zoo, you know, and we're just trying to give him more room to roam.
And benefit, we don't have to deal with him. So they throw Kong into Hollow Earth. And then Godzilla's going crazy because Apex is doing all these experiments and it's like making him crazy and he wants to fight everything. Kong goes to Hollow Earth where his ancestors came from, apparently. And his ancestors had built a large temple structure. They're big monkeys.
What? Big apes?
Big apes. And they built a big temple. And Kong picks up a axe from the floor of this temple, and he goes, ape together strong. And then he sees that there's a bunch of these axes lying all over the floor, and the axes start glowing blue, and it's corresponding to Godzilla using his powers up on the surface. And I was like, oh, the axe heads are made from Godzilla species's back spines, the ones that glow when he does his atomic breath. And so the ancient monkeys realized this, and they created tools to help fight against the ancient Godzilla monsters out of their own scales, because the scales absorb the atomic power. And so Kong takes this axe, and Godzilla, I guess, knows that this happened and shoots an atomic breath down through the earth, boring a hole through the earth into the center of the earth, right next to where Kong is. Kong climbs out from the center of the earth, and he's got a monkey axe, and he's ready to fight in Hong Kong with Godzilla. And the two of them duke it out, and Godzilla shoots his atomic breath, and Kong holds up the axe, and the axe is absorbing the atomic breath, and it's powering it up, and then he smashes back into the head of Godzilla, and it makes a big explosion, and they're like, these two truly are equals. And then the scene continues, and Godzilla beats Kong. Kong is almost dead, and Godzilla is all beat up. And Godzilla has proven himself king of the monsters. But Fran, what about all those experiments that Apex was doing? Well, I forgot to tell you, in the previous movie where Godzilla fights Ghidorah, he bites off one of Ghidorah's heads. Remember, Ghidorah has 3 heads.
Yep, 3 heads.
But Apex was able to retrieve one of Ghidorah's
third
heads.
Head? Okay.
And they took Ghidorah's head and they merged it with an AI and put it in a big robot that looks just like Godzilla.
Oh shit, Mechagodzilla makes an appearance?
They created Mechagodzilla, but the
my god.
the consciousness of Ghidorah was able to merge with the AI and overwhelm the AI to become Ghidorah's consciousness within Mechagodzilla, which is why Mechagodzilla was able to call out to Godzilla because he wants to fight again.
Let's fucking fight.
Also in the movie, they say Ghidorah was so big and had 3 heads, which means that the heads must have communicated telepathically. And so we're able to hook up the telepathic head to the giant robot to a Japanese man who is the child of a different Japanese man. I forgot to mention in the previous movie there was another guy who was named after the
oh my god.
In the previous movie there was a guy named Serizawa who's named after the original
Serizawa.
Who's named after the Serizawa from the original movies, and he is like, Godzilla will be our friend. He will fight the other monsters. You can't fight you can't fight nature with humanity. You must fight nature with nature, etc., etc. He sacrifices himself in the King of the Monsters to revive Godzilla by detonating a atomic bomb next to Godzilla in order to revive him. And his son is mad at that, I guess, and so he's the pilot for Mechagodzilla. And so
Are they drift compatible?
Well, they're not, because Ghidorah takes over and knocks him unconscious and overwhelms the. So it turns on its creator, the lead of Apex, and it rises out of the ground, and it's way stronger than Godzilla. It's like bodying Godzilla. It's also got laser breath, and it's just like kicking the shit out of it. But the little girl who can speak to Monkey goes over to Monkey. He's dying. And they use their ship. They have like a futuristic spaceship as like a defibrillator, and they like shock his chest, and it wakes up Kong. And the little girl goes, Godzilla is not enemy. Godzilla is friend. You must help him. And then he's like, okay. And so he picks up his laser and he picks up his laser axe.
Oh my god.
And then the Mechagodzilla is about to like kill Godzilla by laser blasting into his mouth like they always do. But right as he's about to, Kong jumps up on his back and like redirects the laser into the sky. And then he turns around with his big like spike tail, and he's gonna stab Kong in the chest, but then Godzilla grabs his tail before he can do it. And then they're just like tag teaming this big monster. And then Mechagodzilla has Kong pinned against a building, and he's trying to cut his laser axe into him, but he's holding him back. But then Godzilla fires his atomic breath into the laser axe, and it charges up the laser axe, and then Kong brings it down on Mechagodzilla and cuts him to pieces. And then
that sounds like a great CGI masterpiece.
It fucking kicked ass, dude. It was so cool. I was telling Ethan I was watching, and I was like, they're doing a lot of like, they're throwing a punch, but then the other one catches it before it can land. They do that like 5 or 6 times in a row, and I'm like, all right, I get it. But then Godzilla and Kong share a knowing nod. They respect each other now, and Godzilla slinks back into the Pacific Ocean to swim around, and Kong returns to Hollow Earth to live in peace. He, the king of Hollow Earth, and Godzilla, king of the monsters, living on the land. And that is the current end of the Monsterverse, although we will learn more in April 2024 for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, which is, I guess, the name of the movie, which is a dumb name for a movie.
Yeah.
But we have now seen Godzilla go from a symbol of man's hubris to a thing that sells toys and makes spin-offs and universes and fights other monsters for the benefit of humanity, because the capitalism engine must prevail. this is normally the part where I ask if you guys have questions, but I have instead a little treat for you guys. I told Ethan I would give you a little something I think you would enjoy. And in the spirit of coming full circle and proving my point that Godzilla doesn't mean anything anymore, except Shin Godzilla, which is a very good one. But generally, Godzilla doesn't mean anything anymore. I have found some media that is Godzilla themed.
I'm scared now. I'm scared now.
Is
it porn?
No. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of that, but
okay, you're not showing us Godzilla porn, though.
I have one for each of you. I think you'll both like it, and you can feel free to look them up afterwards.
Okay. Mine's Godzilla porn.
Right. Okay. It's very close, I would say. Fran, for you, I have the YouTube channel Chibi Godzilla, which is a official Godzilla.
It's official.
It's official. It is about young Godzilla who hangs around with the baby versions of the other monsters, like baby Rodan and baby Mothra and baby Ghidorah, and learns lessons about how to be a better Japanese citizen, I think is the main.
That's great.
There's a comic and there is a YouTube animated series.
I am a little concerned because the second video on the playlist is called Be Delicious.
Right. So it's just about this bunch of silly little monsters having fun and learning lessons together.
Ghidorah's coming.
Ethan, for you, I offer a different gift. So in 2019, to tie in with the Shin Godzilla release and just the general like Shin Godzilla universe that was expanded on with the animes that have been coming out recently, in Universal Studio Japan, they came up with a 4D ride that is called the name of the ride is called Godzilla vs. Evangelion, the real 4D, in which the rider enters an Eva from Evangelion.
Of course.
Maybe I should just let the plot synopsis speak for itself. Following the devastation of the second impact, Japan's capital is moved from Tokyo 2 to Osaka 3. The city's buildings are outfitted with turrets to defend it in case of another angel attack. Additionally, strange cosmic waves have recently been causing electrical disturbances throughout Japan. It's at this point that Godzilla appears, and the Evas are deployed in order to subdue him. But while they're fighting each other, King Ghidorah appears, and it is revealed that Godzilla only appeared to fight King Ghidorah. And so Godzilla and the Evangelions team up to destroy King Ghidorah. They succeed in their mission, and Godzilla returns to the Pacific Ocean as... I fuck you not. Shinji looks on and just goes, God bless you, Godzilla. Thank you for helping me.
Oh, man. Asuka's sitting there. She's going, Baka Shinji, Baka Godzilla.
The worst part about this is...
Did they have to rewrite the plot because people didn't like the ending?
This
a couple times after they made the ride.
This is first off, Rei Anami and Asuka are in. They're all. It's literally the cast of
the whole crowd.
Evangelion.
The whole
everyone is here.
And the saddest part, it's lost media. It doesn't exist anymore. There is no known recording of the show ride. And the only thing that exists that I can tell is a audio recording of the show that was taken from someone's phone in their pocket during the show that has never been translated to English. So I know that it's not going to happen. But if I could pray to the universe, I work with some, like, I work in the same line of stuff as this. And so
Yeah.
I know when you reach the end of production, you tend to just throw these things away, or you're under NDA and you like have to dispose of them. But I also know there's some weasel out there who fucking hid away the MP3 file of whatever video they were playing at this 4D ride, which is, it's like on the things where it like rocks around, and then it's like, Shinji, you're baka, and then it like spits like gamer girl, like, yeah, like spits gamer girl spit into your face and stuff like that, and you're like, ah. I know there's a video somewhere of this, and I need to see it. I need to know what I am so like, we're doing it so wrong here. I've been to Universal Studios America, and they had a Kong ride, but it, like, compared
Not
to this, oh my God. So
that's pretty amazing.
Also, the plot of the show, the 4D show, happens at Universal Studios Japan. So what I'm told from the wiki is that apparently you can see other rides, like Hogwarts Castle in the background of this fucking Godzilla vs. Evangelion crossover event. So,
oh my God.
I don't know. That's all I could find. That's all I've got for you guys. I hope I hope that titillated your desires.
I don't even want to try and do like an end or sting or anything. I just want to go out on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm watching the Chibi Godzilla series.
I'm glad I could find some gifts for.
I put a screenshot in the chat for you guys.
Yeah,
it's very cute.
I'm glad I could find some gifts for you guys to end this episode. And indeed, it's the end of the episode. That's right. You've got to the end of another action-packed Lore You Know. Thank you guys for listening. We love to have you here. We love sharing the knowledge that we have of, I feel like, expert kaiju knowers. I feel like we can be classified at this point. We've done enough.
Yeah.
We understand enough.
Oh yeah.
I feel it's inevitable someone asks for an Evangelion episode. To that I say, as I always do, maybe. I don't know. Maybe if we get 1 million subscribers and 100 likes on this video, and we'll think about it. But of course, in addition to thanking you guys for listening to the podcast and for rating us highly on the podcast and for liking and subscribing and telling your friends and all that good stuff that we love it when you do, we want to thank Gailstorm Kitsune for doing the artwork for the podcast. And we want to thank Apajo for doing the intro and outro song, as iconic as Godzilla theme song, which is, well, the Godzilla leitmotif is 70 years old. They still use it every once in a while. So in 70 years, check out Apajo, see if he's still banging them out. I'm sure he will be. That's it, guys. We made it to the end. I'm spent. But I'm overjoyed. Speaking as a man, I feel like I'm a woman who's just given childbirth, and I'm so happy, and it was a labor of love, and I am overjoyed, and I can't wait to do it again. And to that ends, I've been CJ.
I've been Ethan.
And I've been watching Cooking with Chibi Godzilla. It's very cute.
That's actually one of ours. We own that. It's pretty good.
Do you think that Shinji's dad is disappointed in Godzilla?
I think that the way that they got Godzilla to fight was Shinji's dad just looking at him being like, "You're pathetic," and Shin Godzilla was like, "Oh, fine, I will fight it, but I'll complain the whole time."